This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air for the first time with Dana S. Diaz. And we are live on our Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch channels. We also are a featured podcast on Newsly. You can see scrolling below. If you use coupon code GHOST, you can listen. You can stop scrolling and listening. We are, again, a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. So you'll be able to get the audio version of the podcast there, along with other podcast platforms. Welcome to the show. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Well, we're pretty good. We're at episode 916 of the Fan Electric Ghost podcast. We've been out there since 2016. So that's 916 is this episode. And what we're going to talk about is the insidious cycle of narcissistic abuse. And you are the voice of 4 victims of narcissistic abuse. And we're going to talk about your
Yes.
story. And also for the people who are listening rather than watching, there's a website, www.danasdiaz.com. We always like to give people that for those of you who you might be listening rather than watching, you don't see that. So we want to mention that website. What would people find there at that site?
They will find information about where to get my book. They will find a blog, my bio, just various information, whatever I can put out there to help support people and create awareness about this.
That's great. I think it's always good to let people know of how you can connect, and that will be clickable when we're fully published. So it'll actually click through, and people will be able to go
Yeah.
directly there. So in your story is that you were raised by a narcissist, and you married one, divorced one, and now you're still dealing with narcissistic in-laws. So you've been kind of like an unwilling, uh, participant in this kind of situation because
Yes.
society seems to keep on handing these type of situations. I think a lot of people are experiencing that in the world, where sometimes we're being affected by, different social, uh, org structures. Because I was a sociology major, and there's like the microcosm, which is your personal, and then the macrocosm, and you can find that kind of narcissism at the microcosm level and the macrocosm level. So then, like the whole society can be affected personally or as groups.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's a term that's thrown around a lot very loosely. There's people that have narcissistic qualities, but they aren't necessarily bad narcissists. They just have a very healthy view of themselves. And you can laugh that off and just forgive them
Mm.
for being themselves. But, the narcissists, unfortunately, that I have dealt with in my life are the kind that have malicious intent. And it's gone is to the point that, here I am at 47 years old. And because of, living with decades of this, I feel like I'm a magnet for them. I'm autoimmune and I have a lung disease because of all the cortisol and stress hormones and living in
Stress, yeah.
fight or flight for so long. So, it's something that should be taken a lot more seriously than it actually is.
Well, I think a lot of people don't understand the consequences of their words or their actions.
Right.
I'm a Buddhist, and we kind of believe in this, not to put it on anybody, but the idea of like this cause and effect. Like my practice
Yes.
believes in the law of cause and effect. So if you do negative actions, it causes negative actions. Do positive actions, it create positive actions. So if you actualize those things, then you kind of get drawn into it. And and it's like learning. Some people never learn. They will say words don't matter, but then if you think about it, like if you had a parent that
Right.
said you'll never amount to anything, right? That matters. It actually can control your whole
Right.
vision. And then you have a belief that's not a truth, but because it's a truth to you until you figure out that that belief is not true. And so I think that's the damage that people do. They say, "Oh, words don't
Yes.
matter." Yeah, they do matter. you know,
They do, and I mean, I'm
but
living proof of exactly what you said because like you said, I was raised by a narcissistic stepfather, and my mother excused it, enabled it, even gaslit me, still does to this day that he didn't say that, he didn't mean that, oh, he just feels very strongly. But the problem is when you tell a little girl or a little boy or, anybody, every day of their lives, nobody wanted you. You're a burden. I shouldn't have to pay for you. You're never going to be loved. You hear that every day, even though you go out in the world and other people treat you differently and like you are deserving and worthy and you're smart and all these things. You go home to the people that are supposed to make you feel, supported and encouraged. And they tell you this, that after a certain amount of time, you start telling yourself that your self-talk mimics the talk of your abusers. And because nobody could understand why, for me being such a strong-willed little girl, I would always stand up to him and tell him a few things. And I learned some choice words that I shared with him at, pretty young ages too. And how did I end up getting out of there and then falling for another narcissist that I ended up staying with for 25 years? It just, none of it makes sense, except for the fact that I was raised to believe that I
You're kind
wasn't
of programmed.
deserving of being treated well. I
Right.
actually thought, yeah, it was like a form of brainwashing, but it is, because narcissism is based in control. Somebody wants control and power over you so that it fulfills their egotistical need, for subservience or something. But it's pretty disgusting when it's used maliciously like that, and especially to a child, but to anybody. It should almost be criminal to cause this kind of damage to a person.
I was going to ask you what is a narcissist, but you kind of described it there. But maybe you want to give a fuller definition, because some people, like you said, people throw around a word. And I've actually had people come on the podcast and talk about it from their perspective. And every
Yeah.
person that's
Yeah,
has the situation has written about it or talked about it from a perspective they personally experienced. But I want to understand what is your vision of the concept?
the problem with narcissism is that, depending where you go online or what you read, people say there's 5 different types, there's 14 different types. Who knows how many types there actually are? I can only speak for what I've dealt with, which one of them is what people would typically think of a narcissist is an overt narcissist. This is
Hmm.
somebody that walks around like they're the best thing ever. They are God's gift. They are wonderful. Everything they do is perfect. They are not flawed. You have to bow to them. They're entitled. We all know people like that. Not an issue. Again, you can sometimes even laugh it off, except for when they get, nasty about it and actually affect you with it. The type of narcissist I married is a different type called a covert. He actually came off very funny, very charming, but he almost thrived on people's pity. I used to joke, it was like he was like Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. It was always, poor me. I'll never have that. I'll never have that,
Uh,
but it's like you wanted to encourage and uplift him. And, here's positive me wanting to be the people pleaser because I couldn't ever get my mother and stepfather's approval. So, I was a prime target for somebody who needed, that constant attention and reassurance. And that's what they're trying to get out of it. Basically, all narcissists at the core, even the overt ones, have some deep insecurity. But they cannot recognize that they're flawed. So
mm.
they just see the control and the manipulation of others gives them this sense of power that makes them feel the importance that they never otherwise felt. If that makes any sense. It's
Do
very
they
difficult to
project?
describe these.
Yeah.
Y Yes. Yeah, a
Do
lot
does
of
does a
them do
narcissist
project.
project? So they might project their insecurity and basically say it's yours, right? So sometimes
Yes.
what I've experienced is like people will say exactly their issue and pin it on somebody
Mhm.
else or pin it
Oh,
on a
yes.
group and say the other. So the other
Yes.
is actually doing what they are very insecure about, but they pin it
Yes,
on
and
them and say they're
that's
the cause.
exactly it.
You
Yes, and the narcissist I'm currently dealing with, and it's kind of waning a little bit, thank goodness, but, That's exactly the tactic that she uses. It's like, before I can, and not that I do, I just figure it's better not to say anything. I don't even defend myself, but they think that you're going to go out and basically expose them. So before you can do that, they have to discredit you by saying, oh, no, you're the one doing this. You're the one doing this particular thing. Or, like, I know in romantic relationships, and I had this happen with my ex, is, if I was going to church on Sunday, I must be meeting a man and cheating on him at church. He even accused me of having sex with my priest. And I'm like, no, I'm just going for mass. It's Sunday morning. But how many times was he unfaithful? So
Yeah,
there's
that
definitely
projection.
that
Yeah,
projection. Yes,
yeah.
a lot of
They
times it is.
yeah, because they assume that everybody does what they do, or they want to believe it so that they can feel better about themselves, or they want to project
Yeah.
it so that that other is like this like a very negative thing, but it's the
Yeah.
negativity with like with inside themselves that they just
Yes.
can't actually handle and don't address. So it can't be really them. It has to be somebody else.
Yeah, they're not capable of recognizing that they're flawed. Those of us that have a little bit of a healthier mindset, we know we're not perfect. Hopefully we strive to be a little more self-aware and to improve ourselves in some way. Um, but just admitting that, yes, this is not my strength. This is something I'm not good at. That's a normal, healthy, and I hate to use the word normal, so forgive me if anyone's offended by that, but I don't know another word. But, a narcissist is never going to admit that they have to feel very, just, they have to be perfect. And you can, and the other part of that projection, like I said, and with most of the narcissists I've dealt with, they want to project. If I ran around telling people, well, my ex cheated on me, they would look at me and say, yeah, but he said you cheat on him. You see where that goes? So
Yeah, yeah.
sometimes the projection is used to
Totally.
just discredit you. So now you look like the one that is projecting. And, then it's like, well, who do you believe? And when you're
Yeah.
dealing with a narcissist, honestly, in all my years of dealing with it, it's just better. I always say you can't reason with the unreasonable. So it's just better not to say anything. Don't defend yourself. Your truth. Let them, be who they are, and say what they're going to say. But there's just, you're never going to get anywhere trying to convince people one way or another, or them. And honestly, who cares what other people think? You just have to get to the point where you don't care.
Yeah, I think what happened with me is like I had some situations in my family where I felt that. And eventually it's like, I got sick of trying to make things work. So I just kind of walked away from it.
Yes.
I just got out of it because, it wasn't bringing me anywhere, and it was kind of keeping me in a box because
Yes.
like their fears they tried to put on me. Right. And so the thing that happened that was very different for me is I actually got cancer when I was 27
Oh,
and I
goodness.
beat
I'm
it.
so sorry.
I'm 55. I beat it. I'm 55 now. At 27 years, I got it. And then what happened was all the fear from the narcissist in my family. I got overwhelmed by the fact that I won. I beat cancer. So as I beat cancer, then I can beat
Mhm.
this. It's like I don't need to deal with this. And then I decided to really radically change things. And with this kind of, this big crucible moment where I realized that I actually had more power than I thought. And I could go and actually challenge myself and actually say, "No, I don't have to deal with that. No, I can go do something else. I do believe I can try something different." And it changed my life to the point where the person before cancer wouldn't be on the mic. The person before, I
Right.
would never travel, and then I lived in Japan. So I did it. There was this radical shift because the cancer kind of did, and not everybody's going to want something like cancer to happen. But that's where, for me, the breaking point was that I realized I didn't have to deal with that.
Right. And that's the biggest, part of all this is people say, "Well, how did you get out, or how did you heal?" And I think you just come, there is some, like for you with the cancer, there's some turning point. And for me, it was when I became ill as a result of all this. It was just like, okay, I remember a doctor's appointment where the doctor said, "Your body is literally shutting down. I mean, I was down to 93 skeletal pounds. I couldn't breathe. My heart rate was so low. I could barely keep my eyes open. My vision was blurry. My muscles didn't want to move. I was moving like a 100-year-old person. And I just said, okay, here I think I'm being noble. I am a faithful woman. I don't get divorced. I'm going to stick through it no matter what. My son deserves his family unit to stay together. But it was like, okay, it's either all that or me. And I didn't want to die. I mean, I didn't want to suffer here either. So you just get to that point where you just have to choose yourself. And once you start loving yourself and respecting yourself enough to take care of you, then you start removing the toxicity from your life. Because I've also had the same issue with the family that, I don't have a relationship with my mother and my stepfather. And, I'm 47 years old and I'm always going to be the little girl that, yeah, I want my mommy to this day. And I have tears on some days. I share a birthday with her, which is even worse. But, for all the people that say that's your blood, that's your blood. Yeah, but I didn't choose this. It's not good for me. I can't be around people that, just a look or a comment or a snide remark or, because it never ends. I'm
Yeah, the
shaking and I'm
triggers.
sweating and the anxiety. Exactly. It's not worth it. And I'm doing so much better now that, I'm out of my abusive marriage. It's unfortunate, but, I've lost a lot of family that have believed, the baloney that my mother and stepfather put out, because obviously they would never admit to people, well, what happened with you and Dana? They're going to tell what I call stories because they always had a story, but,
Yeah.
and I'm still hearing stories even last week, and it just never ends, but it's better to remove myself from it. I've gained weight. I'm doing better. I will never be, cured, so to speak, but, you can.
Uh-oh. I think I lost you for a second. I hope you can come back. You froze up a little bit. Oh man, that was going good. If we lost her signal for a bit, hopefully she'll come in. I don't know, they froze for a second, so I'm not sure what's going on. Just gonna send her a private chat, see if I can get her back. Because that was going so well. That is a live thing, so let's see. I don't know what happened. We were going so well. Seems to froze. I'm not sure what happened. But we'll just wait for her to come back. We were having a really good conversation, so maybe some kind of internet problem, which can happen because we are a live podcast, but you never know. So hopefully we'll get Dana right back. But we were talking about the idea or the concept of narcissism, and it's prevalent out there, like at the microcosm and the macrocosm level in society. You got a lot of issues with people. You could probably, I don't want to get into politics, but you can, read the headlines and you can see certain people that are actually behaving in the way that we've been talking about. So hopefully we'll get our Dana back and we didn't have some kind of power outage or a storm. But yeah, I'm not sure what happened. Hopefully we can get her back. Because we have a good signal here, but you never know if there's a storm going on wherever we are talking to her. So we're actually in the Northeast, and it's a pretty good day here today. Well, hopefully we'll get her back on soon enough. She might have to reboot her machine. I hope it wasn't like a power plug. Sometimes these machines, like your battery goes out on your laptop and you didn't have it plugged in, and that could be like a problem We had that happen a couple of times, but hopefully that's not the issue. We're still holding on, waiting for Dana to come back. If we have to, we will reschedule and actually do it again. This was going pretty well with what we were talking about, so I hope we can get her back on the line. Here we go.
Back.
Hi. Yeah, I was just
Technical difficulties.
trying to keep it going. But it's
Appreciate it.
no, it's fine. So yeah, we were talking about like family, and a family I think is
Yes.
really hard because like people you have a hard time, especially when the holidays come. Because like in my family, like
Yes.
I haven't been able to go for Thanksgiving or Christmas or all the things, and then I become like the bad guy. Oh, because
Yes.
Chief's got a problem. Kiwi's like, what? But it's not. It's like to me, it's like I decided, and I'm an adult. I said decided. It's like I don't want to have to deal with this. I don't like you said, how it makes you feel. You were getting to a point where it was like hurting your body. It was like
Literally.
like a cancer. It's like this, and you got to
Yes.
solve it. Like I solved mine with like chemotherapy and radiation, but sometimes if you have a toxic person,
Yeah.
how do you solve it? Like you could try to work it out, but if it keeps on triggering, if they keep on triggering and they don't learn and they don't get better, what are you supposed to do? Like just to make other people happy, that's not the solution.
No, it's
Yeah.
not, and neither is, I absolutely appreciate when people seek medical help or mental health help, but at one point, my doctors, decided to put me on Prozac, and I was on an anti-seizure medication, and I had Zofran for nausea because I would get so worked up, my stomach would get upset. And at one point I had two different doctors say, you're on all these medications, you know we're figuring you're depressed, but maybe you're just dealing with a bunch of, a-holes. I mean,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, because
Yeah.
they're like, do you really need it? I was taking all these drugs just to stay married because it was subduing my experience of the extreme emotions. It was keeping me calm. It was keeping my body calm because my body was reacting,
Yeah, you're
as
getting that
much as
fight or
my
flight.
emotions
Yeah,
were.
the cortisol. The
Right.
cortisol.
Right.
Because people forget, human beings were in this fight and flight like when we were hunter gatherers, running away
Yes.
from the saber tooth tiger, running away from the animal, and having to fight. But today, what happens? We get triggered by things that aren't like that tiger, but they are, right? So if you get a person that's triggering you, it's like that tiger coming after you, right? It's like the
It
wolf coming after you.
literally is.
The same thing. If
Yeah,
you get triggered all the time, like it'll weaken you. It will knock your levels down. It'll get you out of whack.
it absolutely does, and I don't think people understand, like, what cortisol, I mean, that's the stress hormone. Sorry, my camera went out. The stress hormone, I mean, your levels are supposed to be between, like, 1 and 600 at various points throughout the day. It took Mayo Clinic testing me. They actually thought they messed up the first, test of my cortisol because it was so astronomically high. They ran it
Mhm.
again, and my levels averaged 2,540. They
You're
should have
super
been
stressed.
between 1 and 600. Yeah, all the time for decades. So, I mean, what does that mean inside your body, to give people perspective? Because a lot of people can relate it to, let's say, like your cancer. It was my body basically decided to attack itself. It thought it was invading
So you
attacking
got
some foreign thing.
autoimmune. Yeah.
So, yes, it was killing my white blood cells. Then it started on my red blood cells when it pretty much wiped out my white blood cells. And the symptoms, I mean, it started with the stomach aches and headaches, but we're talking dizziness, blurry vision. My hands would go numb. I have a lot of fibromyalgia and COPD symptoms. I have a little oxygen machine that when I'm really low on oxygen, I need to get some air in my system. I have EpiPens, I have inhalers. I literally carry a diaper bag with me
Mhm.
wherever I go. And thank God I'm doing so much better now that I can actually leave the house without the diaper bag. But, we joke about it, but it's not funny that people's words and actions, but more so their words, Although I have stories that I could tell where there were no words and nobody touched me. It was the look. Or my
Yeah.
favorite was the silent treatment, because my
Mhm.
mother and stepfather and my ex-husband, I mean, the longest I would go was about 3 to 4 weeks. They call it ghosting now, but I could be 2 feet away from them and they would not see me. They would not look at me, not speak to me. When you do that to a little girl or even a grown woman, because I've been dealing with it for a long time, it's just cruel. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
military tactic that they use on, war prisoners. It really messes up your brain, to where you start thinking you are that insignificant and you are so low, lowly, that people can't even give you common courtesy. And it's disgusting to do that to somebody.
Yeah. I mean, I totally get it being an African American as a kid. Like I grew up in the 70s and
Okay.
my parents put me into a neighborhood that was not mostly it was mostly a white neighborhood. And I dealt with this kind of thing where we had parents that would say, well, don't deal with that kid.
Yes.
That guy got ghosted by the whole
Yes.
neighborhood. Just because my father wanted me to go to a good school because he knew that school had a better rating. And so socially, I had to deal with this like ostracism. And people don't
Yes.
understand what they do. They do it because their grandpa told them, or somebody told them, or the church told them, or whatever. They don't understand the actions they do for against other people. And just because you're
Yes.
not doing what somebody wants or you're not like somebody else, they get this behaviors. You get that at the microcosm, you get it at the microcosm level, and people don't understand because they say, well, words don't matter.
Oh, they
And
matter.
and they matter. It's like how people behave with each other, like civil society. You've got to start to get to understand there's a consequence. You can
Yes.
measure the cortisol. You can measure the stress. You can look at certain groups that have very high blood pressure, that have all these cortisol issues, and why? Because you'll see that
Yes.
systemic social issues actually have impacts on your biology, and some people
They
don't want
absolutely
to
do.
don't want to believe it
No.
because they don't want to believe it and they
The
want to be
mo
able to do whatever they want.
Right. Well, the thing that I've learned is most people actually think they're good people. They actually think they're good people, but I 100% relate. I actually just finished my second book, which deals with my childhood. And a big part of my childhood was, being born to a Puerto Rican mother who wanted to be white. She did not want, I was told when I was a little girl, don't tell anybody, that we're Hispanic. And I was rolling my R's and, because I lived with my great grandma for a while. I rolled my R's, because she always spoke Spanish to me.
Mhm.
Well, the kids made fun of me. And then it was, well, I can't. My mother did the same thing, moved me to the suburbs, primarily Caucasian in neighborhood. And, my skin is light. So I blended in physically. But
Mhm.
then it was, well, my mom said I can't play with you because you're illegitimate. My mom said you're a bastard child, so you're not invited to the birthday
Yeah.
party. And I didn't know what these things meant. And I'm like, why am I? And then I go home and my stepdad's telling me, well, nobody ever wanted you. I shouldn't have to, I was getting hit from all
You get ahead, yeah.
directions.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
just
so you want to talk about a person who felt alone in the world. I have felt alone in my life for a long ass time. And when
yeah.
you feel orphaned, like I say it all the time, but like even serial killers have mothers and friends that sit behind them in court after they've murdered and raped and done horrible things. And here I've led a pretty good life. Like I'm a pretty straight arrow and I've never done anything intentionally to harm anybody. So why was I, literally, I felt like from day one, I just had everything against me. But you're right. It's the kids hear it from their parents. They go to school and treat other kids that way. The parents feed into it. Everybody thinks it's okay. Or, oh, I always get, oh, you've always been so sensitive. No, I'm not sensitive. I'm a human being with a heart and a mind, and I shouldn't be, you know, my
Well,
my
humanity
validity in this world shouldn't be questioned.
Yeah.
I
I
should
mean,
be
it's
able to
just
roll my R's, and where I remember wearing, this lavender floral dress that my grandma bought me, and people, again, I don't mean offense, but it was a very Hispanic, fluffy, roughly, little
mhm.
girl dress, and I thought it was the prettiest thing until I went to school and all the kids made fun of me, and like I never wore that dress again. And my mother wanted to conform so much to, the Caucasian neighborhood, and, khaki pants, and let's shop at the Gap. And, and again, I feel like I always have to say, I don't mean to offend anybody, but that was the reality of life. And,
Yeah. Well, I
nobody
think
should ever be different. And so I'm just like, I think people just need to, embrace who they are. And hopefully we all get to that point. It took me a long time, but where you can just say, you know what, I'm not perfect, and I may be a little quirky and weird and whatever, but this is who I am, and it's okay. And there are people in this world that love me that don't have to, because they're not biologically related, but I have no obligation to people I am biologically related to that don't give me just basic courtesy of acknowledging my presence and my existence.
yeah, I mean, human being is not a special interest group, right? Like, if you think it's
Right.
like people say, "Oh, well, we can't give," they're too sensitive. But like, you gotta understand, it's like, the words matter, the actions matter, like bullying matters,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
you sometimes you get this kind of narcissistic, you get the bullying behavior, and I've seen this bullying behavior from a kid to the corporate America to, like, they're just out there
Yeah.
in the general public, to the point like you're in your homeowners association, and then people want to bully people. That's like, oh, you have to
Yeah.
have this, you have to do
I have
this.
seen that too. You're
It's
right.
like, and there's people who just are so assertive that they don't think about other people's rights. And we're supposed to be in the country of individuals, but we find that people want to turn like these individuals into their approved individuality. Like, there's an
Right.
approved individuality that is a conformity in a world that you should be able to do whatever you want to, and you're told that you can. Then you find out that there's certain levels of conformity that they want you to have, and it's
Right.
like either it's beliefs that aren't truths that they try to reinforce. And if you tend to be like, if you're a creative person or you're in that other group, and like I had a bunch of kids when I was growing up that were kind of like the oddballs. I was hanging out with
Yeah.
the kid that was a Portuguese kid, a kid from Poland, a Jewish kid, another kid that was an Asian kid. And we were in a neighborhood. Oh, you guys are weird. You guys are
Yeah.
weird. You stay over there. So we were all kind of like the nerds, and we kind of had our own group, and we survived because we were the outcast. And we saw this like,
Right.
why are we being outcast? So, well, we don't care. We're going to do what we want. We started playing music, and then suddenly, because we did the music, then people say, "Oh, that's cool." Then we finally did something that they thought was cool, and then
Yeah.
we got some recognition there. But it's like, you know, it's like that's not, you shouldn't have to do something to be accepted. You should just be accepted. But
Exactly.
but that's what you find is that people try to create so much conformity, even within like the microcosm of your family relationship. We have this narcissist trying to control
Yeah.
everything to the point where it's like, well, shouldn't you be allowed to be kind of spread your wings and become who you are? Like, no, you got to do this. You got to follow that. It's like, why?
No.
you
Well,
know,
why is because people want power. I mean, narcissists absolutely want power, but whether it's politicians or, the world leaders, people want power. And to create power, you have to have others submit to you. And so that's where the conformity comes in. But, I'm with you. I think that the real issue, and, maybe I could solve all the world's problems with this, is just a matter of respect.
mm,
People are different. People are going to think differently than you. We have so much division, as you say, in families, in communities, in our country, in the world. We have all these things going on, and it's because of different perspectives and different beliefs. And I don't understand why, of course, it's so idealistic to say, why can't we just all get along? But it's a matter of respect. and it does start in your home. It starts in your home with your kids or whoever you're living with. And when you go to work, respect. I can respect people that have different political beliefs than I do. I can respect people that, choose to live a different lifestyle than I do, because that's their thing. And if they're thriving and they're happy and they feel right in what they're doing, let them. And I should be entitled to the same respect. But unfortunately, we live in a world where everybody wants everybody to agree on the same thing, and it's never going to happen. But then we get, caught up in all these wars of words and these debates, and then, war happens.
Yeah, well, even you get to the point like nowadays, you've got people that want to control the paradigm so much that they try to ban books that don't give spread the truth that they want.
Oops.
So if you actually tell, like,
Exactly.
I'm part Native American, right? I'm part Blackfoot Indian and Cherokee, and then African American. In certain places, they don't want to tell the story of the Cherokee. They don't want to tell the story of the Apache because it makes them feel bad. Well, if that's real history, then who cares if it makes you feel bad? That's historic events, and you shouldn't be able to control that just because you get a power position in a narcissistic way, and then say, "Well, you don't." That makes certain people in my community feel bad to hear about the Trail of Tears or to hear about what happened to the Cherokee or what
Right.
happened to the. That's not right. And that's the same thing. You get this kind of push down because people want to control perspective. And I've seen it
Exactly.
at the microcosm and the macrocosm, and it's very dangerous because
It
if you
is.
go back to World War II, Mussolini and Hitler and Stalin, like
Yeah.
what was going on? You had people
Right.
with this kind of narcissism, and it got to a
Yeah.
country level, it got to a nation level, and then where does it go?
And
you
that's the
know,
scary part, because I mean, I've only, thankfully my experience is, just in the family level, in the family unit, but it's that same idea. The thing that I could never understand is that when people see, like, you mentioned Hitler, we had the whole world watching what he was doing. Nobody stopped him. Well, I mean, they tried and they eventually did, but he was getting away with
he
it.
was getting away with
How
it.
do you do that?
Yeah, well, they
It
get
doesn't
away.
make sense.
Well, they get away with it until they hit somebody that has a bigger stick. There's like finally
Yeah,
you get to the point where you hit too many red buttons, and then somebody pushes back. As long as he wasn't hitting certain red buttons, the world was letting him do it. And then when he hit certain red buttons, they pushed certain points. The other nation states said, "Oh, we can't have that." So then he got the pushback. But if he had gone to a certain point, they would have allowed it. He's kept on pushing it, and so that's the
right,
problem. Is I think the narcissists sometimes keep on pushing it until they get to the breaking point, and then it
right.
kind of falls
But
down.
like, and that's the thing. But like I said, at the family level, I have been in situations where people have witnessed things happening to me and witnessed events, and it's ignored. Nobody has stood up for me. Nobody has told the narcissist, not to do this or that or whatever. When I have had to call the cops when things got violent with my
Mhm.
ex-husband and my life was in danger, I was shamed. The victim shaming comes in. And even now with the book, I have had somebody reach out to me, a family member that, oh, you're not supposed to, how could you do that? How could you write this book? And I'm like,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
how could they do these things to me? Why am I supposed to keep my mouth shut? Because nobody has ever stood up for me. And look what happened to my body. Look what happened to me. So
Well,
no, I'm
people
not
don't
going to
take.
sit.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
don't
I'm
take
not going to be,
responsibility.
bullied into submission, which is what everybody wants, whatever level in the world you're at. That I'm not going to do it. Somebody
Well, I
has
think
to
what
speak
yeah.
up.
Well, I think the bullies part of what happens with the bullies is they don't get any resistance until like they hit the red button where somebody has the bigger stick and said, "Well, you're getting into my zone," right? And so then
Right.
then then you have the fight. But say as long as people's own interest are not are kind of maintained, or they don't, it's like the kids in the class. It's like nobody's going to raise their hand because there's all this fear that you're going to say the wrong thing. And then if
And
you're
that's it, is the
under
fear.
the kind of control, yeah, if you're under the control of somebody, you don't want to change what's like you got used to it. So they're used to the abuse, they're used to the structure, they're comfortable with this like the day to day, and they don't want things to change. So change causes like, oh, well, what's going to happen if that changes? Then I don't know what to do. So they rather stay in something that's really not good, but it's what they know. It's kind of like so I think it's the same situation as the people are kind of stuck
Exactly.
in what is comfortable, even though it's not really comfortable, but they can't see a way to change it. And this is where people actually have been
Yeah, and they're
taught
comfortable in numbers too, and
they're taught not to think, seek therapy, to tough it out, to like, oh, just not
exactly,
talk about it. So
exactly.
then you become the bad guy when you talk about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, exactly. Why do you have to talk about that? Why do you have to hash that back up? I don't know, because I live with it every day of my life, and I wanna stop other people from having to endure it, and I wanna hopefully influence somebody to, let them know there's hope. You can thrive after it. You can get through it no matter what it is, but that is a big problem, that there's a lot of people that look the other way, and I have just, at my age, I'm kind of at the point where if you're going to enable or excuse somebody who's abusive, no matter whether they're a narcissist or not, you're basically doing the same thing they're doing, and I'm done with you too. I don't have room in my life for people that have that kind of level of disrespect or unkindness in their heart.
But I think also that we've seen over the years, like the police never really handled this very well until they started being taught by sociologists and psychologists how to address it. And they still got police departments that don't address it right, right? That don't
Yes,
deal with domestic abuse, don't deal with narcissistic tendencies in a relationship, don't know how to handle it, don't have haven't been don't read the books, don't take the courses, don't understand the dynamics they're going into.
exactly.
And that needs to change in places where they've been more involved and they've done it and they've created places, safe spaces for people and understand the situation for the person who's facing it and doesn't treat them like a criminal. Don't treat the victim as a criminal. Don't treat, the person making the complaint with like disrespect because they don't believe in it, because they don't understand the concept. I think that's still a lot of work that probably has to be done in certain places, in the world and even, within the US, I think.
Even here, because let me tell you, at the end, actually, even after my divorce from my ex-husband, I could not get him to move off of our property that he had willfully, allowed me and my son to stay in. We had a separate little in-law house on our property. It was a little farm. And again, this was after the divorce. He caught wind that I was dating somebody and shot a gun outside my bedroom one night, a few times. And that was actually the very first time that I had called the cops on him. Um, and 6 cops were at my house. The title was in my name, deed was in my name. My ex was allowed to live on the property, but after that, I said I want him gone, and they didn't even arrest him. They didn't file a report. They said they had no cause to remove him. My neighbors witnessed it. Um, and he had shot their dog in the past for no reason other than walking across our front yard, shot their dog in the neck. So, I mean, this is somebody that, had a record of having been in jail before, had DUIs, and the police did nothing. And I said, well, I'm not staying here after what happened. I was alone there in the house that night. I said, I'm not staying there. And so I was told to leave my own house because they would not remove him.
So that to me is like the example of like a male culture stuck in this
Mhm.
kind of male centered belief that's very sexist, not didn't read anything sociological, didn't even read any kind of psychological impact,
I know, but
and didn't
it's
do the
sad
work.
though.
didn't do the
It's
work.
sad though that victims, I know I'm not the only one that suffered that, and I'm not in. I mean, yeah, we had a little farm and whatever, but we're a little over an hour outside of Chicago. I mean, we're not like, in the
Yeah,
middle of Montana or anything,
or Mississippi
so
or
I
Texas.
expect exactly. So I expect a little bit more of progressive beliefs and ideas about, how
Well, I
things
think
should
there's a
be
lot of
handled.
retraining. There's a lot of training that has to happen because people, you get into like what's going on in the police. Sometimes they've kind of taken this military type of
Yeah,
training and don't have sensitivity training to the 80% of the calls they get are sociological, psychological situations that don't require like a 9/11 response. They require a
exactly.
different type of response. And because if you focus only on the 9/11 response, well, that's not happening every day. What is actually happening every day? Your kind of situation is the day to day.
Yeah,
That's where they need the training. But the politics of it is like, oh, we focus on the other thing. So you get this
exactly.
militarization where it's like, oh, tough guy, you're gonna be the Rambo. Like that's nice if that happens, but what's really happening is what happened to you.
Right.
And that's the kind of situation they need to be trained for, but it's not valued. So we got to
No.
get the society to value like what is the most common situation that you run into? What is the correct response to everybody involved? How do you get trained? And I think it's not understanding what like the whole idea of a narcissist, which is probably heavily the kind of problem that they're running to on those calls, on those domestic
Exactly.
violence calls, and they don't understand what tools they need to have or what they
Exactly.
should do.
Exactly. And that's part of the reason I wrote this book. I mean, I know there's many, many other women and men as well that have suffered, much more than I have. Some aren't here to tell their stories, but I feel like, I'm pretty direct and I was pretty open and honest in this book. It's pretty raw, but I think it definitely gives people a perspective of what it feels like to be in it. Like you said, the day to day. That no, I wasn't walking around with black eyes. I was going to t-ball games with cupcakes and smiles, and
Mhm.
everything's fine. But behind closed doors, it was not fine at all. And people just don't understand that, or they say, if it was so bad, why did you stay so long? Okay, well, when you're afraid of somebody, you don't walk out. When somebody has threatened to take your child and attempted to kidnap your child in the middle of the night and tell you you're never going to see your kid again, you're scared. You tread a little more carefully. You don't just walk out. It's a nice idea. A lot of people say, oh, well, if my spouse cheated on me, I'd be out. If my spouse this, yeah, I thought I was one of those people too. But guess what? When you're in this situation and you have a life together and families and kids and a mortgage and everything else,
Yeah, it's
you
hard.
can't just up and walk out. It's
It's very
not
difficult.
always that easy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to walk out of that social construct of the marriage because you'll feel guilt for getting out of it, right? And then you feel like you have to work on it so much, and they're making you feel like you did something wrong. Because that's
Yes.
part of the whole psychology of it is they make you feel like, well, I'm doing something wrong. I need to fix it. So you're trying to be responsible, but they're irresponsible and they're
Yeah.
never going to take ownership. And then, society at the macrocosm needs to give you a safe place, needs to
Yeah.
give you a structure so you can get more people out of that. But,
Exactly. But they
they're
didn't
like,
for me.
yeah, because they have other
They didn't
reasons.
for me.
Yeah,
I
they
just was
don't.
fortunate that I had some people in my life that made sure that I was protected and safe. And,
Found the right
no
people.
matter what, I just had to fall back on my, you know, m- my wholehearted belief that as a human being, I knew even if I lost everything and had nothing, if all I had was my son, that people would make sure we were fed and sheltered and clothed and just be decent human beings. And you just get to that point where but there should absolutely be more social structures in place to help women that are scared, to help them get out before it's too late, and to help their children, because it's not good for the children to be in those situations
Yeah,
either.
you have some some spiritual practices will put that family structure over your individual protection.
Yeah, I mean, I was born and raised Catholic, still Catholic to this day, but I honestly thought it was duty, I talked to one priest, and no offense against him, but he said, well, sometimes, it's like the Holy Mother, you have to suffer, and gave me the whole thing. And I thought,
Yeah.
okay, so this
Yeah.
is what I was here for. But then I talked to another priest that is still a very good friend of mine that said, no, I don't care what our religion says, you need to be safe. You get divorced, you walk out, do whatever you have to do, because you are more important. And whatever you believe in, but in this case, we're talking about God. He said, God does not want this for you. This is not the life you were meant for. And that kind of gave me that little nudge that it was okay.
Well, you gotta understand that, like, people interpret like religion for their own benefit. So if you've got this male-centered concept that tends to put women to be subjugated, and if you actually read what they actually said, right, and don't take the interpretation, you actually
Well,
read,
yeah.
you
And
can find that
honestly,
they didn't really believe that.
yeah, and
That's
I'm
like
gonna defend the Catholic Church right now, though. The Catholic Church is much more progressive than it comes off, but unfortunately, we have some of the older generation of priests that still have that old ideology, like what you're talking about. But fortunately, by the time I got down to the priests that were a little younger and newer and more with the times, they were 100% supportive. And the day after my divorce, I walked into my church. For $40, I signed those annulment papers. It was done, no questions.
Another problem. Oh, we're having a good situation. We just had another little glitch here. Maybe it'll come back. We're having have a little bitter thing. We're having a good conversation, but let's see if it comes back. It might be your camera. I'm not sure. Trying to bring her back in. We're actually near the close of the episode, but I wanted to kind of finalize our points of view. While we're waiting for it to come back, I want you to check out www.danadiaz.com. And you can go there and you can check out her book. She's written a memoir about her struggles and her eventually be able to get out of that marriage we've been talking about. She married and then divorced that situation, and so she published her memoir about the repercussions of this in the spring of 2023. You can go out to www.danadiaz.com and check it out. So here we go. We got her back.
I'm back. Yeah, I think God wasn't hearing my defense of him or something.
Yeah. Well, I just want to let people. Yeah, I just want people to understand. When you're in the situation, like those the whole idea, like truths and beliefs. You can get people who are caught up in beliefs that really aren't truths, and you got to understand your own situation. And
that's 100% correct. I mean, I don't care what religion or upper power, or if you don't believe in anything, at the end of the day, we're all human beings. And I think we have to, just remember that, our physical health, our healthy mindset, that's got to come before all the things that society puts on us, before the religion, before the politics, and all the baloney that, really influences all of our decisions and our actions and our behaviors. We need to be more conscientious of just being human beings.
Well, you don't want to suffer narcissistic abuse because somebody has a structural, basically gives a structural acceptance. Well,
Right.
the book says you should handle it, or the more social moray is that you should tough it out. It's kind of like like men are told like, oh, you shouldn't talk about your pain, shouldn't show weakness, and then that makes you act like a jerk. It's like, so if you act like a jerk, it's like, how is that going to help anybody? Just because you want to tough it out and be macho or whatever, that doesn't really help anybody. Doesn't help any, your partner doesn't help anybody around you. Well, I think it froze again, but yeah, I think that's what we're talking about. It's the idea that you got to be safe. You can't let the world make you feel that it's okay to be abused. And anything that makes you feel that, you got to reject that. So I think that's what we were trying to get across there. So let me see if I can get her back again. Okay, we were still having some trouble, but we're almost near the end of the episode. We were doing okay, but I guess we had some problems today with the net. Um, but I think it's been a good conversation in the time that we've had her on about these things, and it's very important. And I would like people to go out to the danadiaz.com and check out her memoir. And again, it's going to be fully clickable. When you check this out, you'll be able to fully check it out and click through on that on the published version of the podcast. And sorry for the glitching today. You never know about with the web, what's happening. And so we were very happy to have had Dana on the show. Hopefully, we can get her back on to kind of do a sign off. But if we can't get her back, we might end it here. But we'll wait a couple of minutes and let her try to get back on. So again, go to www.danasdiaz.com. That's DANASDIAZ.com. Then it's www.danasdiaz.com. And you'll be able to click on that and go directly to it on the published version of the podcast. And we're on many, many platforms, including iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple, Amazon Podcast, Google Podcast, YouTube, Facebook, many places you can watch the podcast. And so hopefully we'll get her back. I know she was having trouble with her webcam. So we'll have a great night tonight if we don't get her back, but we're going to hold on a couple more minutes just to see if we can get her back for a sign off. If we can't, then we'll just we'll end it here. But just give us a couple minutes to see if she can come back. Here you go. There you go.
I'm so sorry. This is why I need to move back to the city. I think this living in the stick stuff, the internet goes in and out. So I apologize.
Well, I think we've had a really good conversation, and I was telling people about your website to go get your book.
Thank you.
And I want people to make sure that they do click through and check that out, and maybe talk about more about on your website. What can they find on your website at danadiaz.com?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a blog, so, just different other topics related to narcissistic abuse or some of my experiences are on there. And I will be adding to the website. I will be publishing the second book, which deals with the childhood and being raised by a narcissistic parent and an enabling parent. That should be out by the end of the year. And then next year, I should have the third book out, the final in the trilogy, which will deal with narcissism in a friendship situation. So we're covering all of it: the romantic relationship, the parental relationship, and then a friend relationship. But absolutely, everybody can get a hold of me on social media as well: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. And I want people to reach out, whether it's a personal experience, questions, you need support, encouragement. I try to be very responsive to everybody. I just, want to make sure people just understand I've been there, I've done that, I'm out of it, but there's definitely hope on the other side.
Have you toured with your book, done the bookstore kind of tour?
Yeah, and if people follow me on social media, I do post every weekend. I've been somewhere. I'm taking a break this weekend, but I should have some other states coming up. I've been to 3 states already. I know states are big, so I might be making multiple visits, but yeah, I will still be doing that throughout the rest of this year and as the other books come out, because I think it's really important to connect with people, personally, not just like, hey, go buy my book. It's really important to me when I go to these book signings, I try to spend some time with each person, even if there's a line, which sometimes there is, but I want to hear people's stories and I want to hear the other experiences. But unfortunately, I find we all can relate on so many levels. And sometimes it's just nice to give them a hug and just let them know somebody's there for them. But I absolutely love to meet people who have had the unfortunate circumstances that I have had, and even if they haven't, I've met mental health professionals that just want the perspective on being a victim so that they can help the people that they're working with, and legal professionals. I have had one that had a wonderful discussion with and she, helps people from the legal standpoint, of getting out of those situations with their children and the custody issues and everything. So it's not just for victims of abuse. And honestly, everybody says it's a page turner and they can't put it down. So if you're just looking for something exciting to read on the beach, I'm told that it's a good one.
Well, that's always great. I'm being a creative person. I love having this podcast. Because I like to get, issues like this out there.
Yeah.
And give people that kind of platform. And hopefully this helps more people know about your book and the books that you're getting ready to write or working on. And it's always been to me like to allow the world to know about people that maybe they didn't, think about, or topics they didn't think to talk about. That's why I like to keep it very expansive. And I want to thank you for being on the Family Electric Ghost podcast today. Again, people should go out to that website, www.danasdiaz.com. It will be fully clickable when we publish on multiple platforms, or on any platform that you can watch or view a podcast. We're on the major platforms, so you'll be able to check that out. Just go to Family Electric Ghost, and you'll be able to, watch it on Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, listen to it on Apple, iHeartRadio, Amazon, Google, many, many platforms, whatever one you like to listen or watch a podcast. So thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a good night.
Have a good night too.